Hello, music fans. We are in July now, so half the year is already over, and there's been a lot of great music in the metal, rock, and prog world so far this year. So I wanted to give my top 25 albums of the year so far. You can see some album covers there, so you might get a few spoilers from that if you recognize those. And like I said, it's been a great year for new music. So far, I've listened to 214 new albums this year, and that includes 29 subgenres of metal, rock, prog, punk, electronic, pop, bluegrass, and folk. If you look at this diagram here, hopefully there's some data nerds and Excel nerds out there like me who enjoy seeing percentage breakdowns and stuff like that. You can see which genres I listen to the most so far this year. It's progressive rock, about 23% of my listening being that, and then progressive metal, about 20% that. And progressive metal is my favorite genre, so you'll see that kind of dominate this list of top 25, but there is a handful of progressive rock albums on here as well. You'll see a technical death metal, a post-rock album, and an alternative rock album. So without further ado, let's jump into number 25, which is Gorod and the Orb. It's the seventh album by this band from France, and this is a great album. It's technical death metal with progressive influences. Check out the track The Orb. That's my favorite track on the album at the moment, but the whole album is great. Just blistering technical guitar parts, extreme vocals, almost all harsh screaming, but there is the odd moment with some clean singing for contrast. If you're a fan of bands like The Faceless, Obscura, Obsidious, and Archspire, or other similar tech death bands with prog influences, you'll like this. Next up at number 24, I've got Redemption and I Am the Storm. This is their seventh album as well. They're an American band, and it's progressive power metal. This band features Tom England of Evergrey on vocals. I really enjoy Evergrey, so I expected I would like this. And I was pleasantly surprised. This band sounds even more progressive than Evergrey. The songs are a little bit hit and miss on the album. There are some songs that are amazing, but then other songs that sound pretty safe, like typical radio rock. But check this out if you're a fan of Symphony X, Fate's Warning, or Evergrey. My favorite song here is Action at a Distance, but there's other great songs like Resilience has their heavy and shreddy side, has really great impressive guitar shredding. The emotional depiction of light has their soft and emotional side with amazing vocal performances. And Action at a Distance is their long and most progressive epic. They also do a cover of the Genesis song Turn It On Again. They do it in the prog metal style, which is kind of neat, but doesn't really fit the sound of the rest of the songs. The keyboards on this album remind me a lot of Symphony X. The vocals of Tom England sound kind of like Michael Bolton of progressive power metal, and I mean that as a compliment. They do sound cheesy, but they're amazingly well done. Number 23 on my list of 25 favorite albums so far in 2023 is Vintersea with Woven into Ashes. It's the third album by this American band. It's progressive, melodic death metal. There's some black metal and post metal influences scattered in there. There's female vocals on this one with both singing and screaming, intense guitar playing, fast drumming, lots of energy and brutality, but also beautiful atmosphere and melody. If you're a fan of bands like Ginger, I think you'll like this. My favorite track at the moment is At the Gloaming Void. Number 22 is Enslaved and Heimdal. It's the 16th album by this Norwegian band. It's progressive black metal. And they've really never made a bad album, but I love their later albums, the last 8 albums they made, including this one, where they lean more towards progressive metal than black metal. They've always had bits of both prog and black metal in their sound, and they still do, but they've been shifting more towards the progressive metal side of their influences than the black metal side over the years, which I like. I think this album will still please their black metal fans because it has a lot of moments that have that intensity as well. But it could also appeal to prog fans who don't like black metal if they can overlook that harsh, shrieking vocal style. There is some clean singing here as well. And my favorite track is the title track, Heimdal. Number 21 is Dave Matthews Band, The Walk Around the Moon. So here we are at first non-metal album on the list. This is alternative rock. It's the 10th album by this American band. And I like everything they've done, but particularly I like their last 3 or 4 albums. I think they're on a bit of a hot streak with those. And I think I'm atypical and weird in my Dave Matthews Band tastes compared to most people. I think most people like the old stuff, but I actually like the new stuff. I got into them back in 2009 when their third most recent album, or fourth most recent album came out. Big Whiskey and the Grugrex King, that's my favorite, as it's the first one I got into. But this one's great too. My favorite track is Madman's Eyes, which is a solid track with a bit of Middle Eastern vibe going on there. I also like The Only Thing and After Everything. Back into progressive metal with number 20 in Katatonia, Sky Void of Stars. This is the 12th album by this Swedish band, and it's progressive metal. It's got some doom metal influences, some alternative rock influences. And this is another band that doesn't really have any bad albums in their discography, but I feel like their most recent output is better than their earlier stuff for me, as it's more in the progressive rock, progressive metal style, the last 6 albums in a row that they've done. They've been getting more and more progressive over time. They've nearly completely abandoned their early career sound. Early in their career, they were death doom and black metal more so. This is probably my 4th favorite album from them, but it's at least definitely in my top 6 for them. They've really improved their guitar solo game on this album as well, so check it out if you want to hear some impressive guitar playing. Also some good impressive vocals. The lead singer of this band also has a low voice, which is atypical for progressive metal, so it's nice if you want to hear something different where you're not always hearing like high-pitched vocals all the time. Number 19 is Sigur Ros with ATTA. This is ambient post-rock with classical influences, and it's the 8th album by this Icelandic band. It's very beautiful and peaceful sounding, cinematic music with minimal percussion. It's very slow music, and it's kind of sad, but to the point where it can bring you to tears, but also hopeful and uplifting at the same time. Lyrics on here are usually not in English. They primarily sing in Icelandic, but they also sometimes sing in a made-up language they call Hopelandic or Volenska or Vonlenska, which has a lot of non-linguistic vocalizations that just sound good with the music. And this album sounds particularly good because they feature a full orchestra. My favorite track on here is Bloodsburg. Blodberg, I think it's pronounced, and it means blood rock. Number 18, I've got Yes and Mirror to the Sky. This is the 23rd album by this British band that's one of the most popular and best prog rock bands out there. They rose to heights during the classic 70s era of prog rock. And I think this is a real step up from their last 2 albums, The Quest and Heaven and Earth, which were not their best work, but this one's a lot better. Still not quite on the same level as their classic 70s albums, but a solid step in the right direction for them. My favorite track is the title track, Mirror to the Sky. My second favorite is the opener, Cut from the Stars. Number 17 is a debut album by Tritop, and it's called Rise of Kassandra. This is progressive rock. They're an Italian band, and even though they formed way back in 2006, this is their first album. So I guess they've taken a long time to hone their skills, and you can really tell they're really excellent musicians, lots of great musicianship on here. Starts with a 13-minute title track and ends with a 24-minute prog epic called The Sacred Law of Retribution. Some moments almost sound like Gentle Giant, and there's a part that sounds freakishly similar to the end of Octavarium by Dream Theater at the end of their 24-minute epic. If you're a fan of Spock's Beard, Transatlantic, and Dream Theater, I think you'll like this. Number 16 is another debut album. I think this is my second favorite debut of the year so far, so there's still one more to come. And this is Avkrvst with the Approbation. And they're a Norwegian band. The first single they released, The Pale Moon, sounds kind of like Opeth around the Blackwater Park time, except with a bigger focus on the softer parts with clean vocals. It's a progressive rock album, but there is some metal influence on here. There are even growls right near the end of the song, The Pale Moon. Most of the album sounds like a mixture of Porcupine Tree and Opeth, but the last song is a long prog epic that had some parts that reminded me of King Crimson. It's a really strong debut and cements this as a band that I will follow every release for going forward. Really great debut. My favorite track here is Arcane Clouds. Next, let's talk about OK Goodnight as they come in at number 15 with their album The Fox and the Bird. This is progressive metal, their second album. Big thanks to Rhyme Signature's channel for putting this on my radar. There's amazing female vocals on here with mostly clean singing, but some harsh vocals. Lots of beautiful, soft, folky passages, but also some heavy riffing metal sections. If you're a fan of bands like Haken and the Deer Hunter, I think you'll like this. Number 14 is Karmic, Juggernaut, and Phantasmagloria. This is the second album by this American band. It's psychedelic progressive rock, kind of quirky, and I was very pleasantly surprised with how great this was. If you're a fan of the Mars Volta, King Crimson, Thank You Scientist, and Flummox, I think you'll like this. It kind of sounds like a mix of those bands to me. Really like the chord progression. No, not the chord progression. The percussion on the song Psycho. Their sound is like Mars Volta vocals with King Crimson instrumentals and a bunch of horns. It's very unique how they put the credits for the album right in the last track as well. I think people who listen to music on shuffle might not like that if that track comes up randomly, but I kind of liked it. It actually works well when you listen to the album from start to finish, as you should. And they have a very comedic vibe with their lyrics and spoken word interludes. Their craziness reminds me of Frank Zappa or the wackier works of Devin Townsend as well. And as amazing as this album is, I also went back and checked out their debut album because of this, and I think it might even be slightly better than their second album. Number 13, I've got Riverside with ID.Entity. This is progressive rock. It's got some metal influences in there, but not really enough for me to call it a progressive metal album. It's the 8th album by this Polish band. I really enjoyed the single I'm Done With You. Then the single Friend or Foe dropped, and that one had a strong 80s feel. Some people might find that song cheesy and might not like it, but rest assured, even though that's the debut song on the album, don't be fooled by that. The whole album does not sound like that, and I probably wouldn't like it if the whole album sounded this way, but I kind of like it for one song. I didn't think that should be the opening song, so I feel like they maybe should have shuffled around the sequencing a little bit on this album. That song, Friend or Foe, sounds a little bit like AHA, but other parts sound like Rush, in particular the parts where they alternate between reggae and prog rock. If you're a fan of Leprous, Sowen, Haken, and Porcupine Tree, check this out because it's almost on the progressive metal side like those, but there's no screaming or anything grating or jarring. So it could be a good gateway into progressive metal for people who aren't really into that extreme stuff. My favorite, this will probably be on my year-end top 40 for sure. And it's one of my favorites from Riverside. I can't really remember what my favorite one from Riverside is, but this is up there among their great releases. They're a really solid band. You should check out their whole discography if you haven't. Number 12 is Omnerod with the Amensal Rise. This is their third album. They're from Belgium, which is not a country that you hear a lot of progressive metal from, but they're a great progressive death metal band. This is the first album of theirs I heard, and I was blown away. It's a good album for fans of Wilderun, Obliviscaris, Devin Townsend, and every member of the band brought their A game in their performances. The compositions on here are really epic journeys. Number 11 is Stormhaven and Blindsight. This is another progressive death metal album. It's the fourth album by this French band. Another one that I think fans of Opeth and Wilderun will like. They have a prog epic as their last track, an almost 25-minute epic called Dominion, which is my favorite track on the album. And when I heard this album, I immediately listened to all their other albums right after this, and they're all great. So I found a new band to obsess over this year. And on that note, another great band that I found to obsess over this year is Black Orchid Empire. And they released their album Tempus Veritas this year. This is progressive metal, very genty, some poppiness and alternative influences in there too. It's the fourth album by this band from the UK. It's really catchy and accessible, but also genty. If you're a fan of Tesseract, I think you'll like this. The vocals are kind of like that. There's no harsh vocals, so this is also a good gateway album into progressive metal. My favorite track is Last Ronin. The intro gave me Tool vibes, but when the vocals come in, they sound more like Tesseract. Really great song. I also think fans of Soen would like this band because I get some Soen vibes on this album. And other great standout tracks are Scarlet Haze, an amazingly catchy chorus, and Glory to the King, another great song and solid chorus. Number 9 is King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard and their album PetroDragonic Apocalypse, which has a long subtitle that I couldn't even fit on this slide here, but I couldn't fit it in the title, but I threw it down there at the bottom left here. It's Dawn of Eternal Night and Annihilation of Planet Earth and the Beginning of Merciless Damnation. It's the 24th album by this very busy Australian band. They make albums and songs in many different genres, usually with an emphasis on psychedelic rock, progressive rock. They did a thrash metal album called Infest the Rat's Nest way back in 2019, and this is pretty similar to that in sound and aesthetic. But it's a bit more progressive. And I like it even better than Infest the Rat's Nest, actually. This is probably my top 5 King Gizzard albums overall, but I need more listens to decide for sure. They basically made a full-on prog metal album for the first time, so it's really nice to hear a band that I love playing my favorite genre of music. I love all the time signature changes and odd time parts, the energy and aggression in the guitar riffs, the drumming and the vocals. They're all just really fun. The tone of the guitars sound like Metallica to me. But the complexity of the songs is way beyond anything Metallica ever did. If you like Megadeth and Metallica, but want to hear music like that done with the crazy quirkiness of Mr. Bungle and the rhythms and atmosphere of Tool, this is an album you should check out. I wasn't too big on the single they released, Gila Monster. I feel like it might be one of the weakest tracks on the album, but it does have the catchiest chorus with the gang vocal chant, so that's probably why they picked it. And it's kind of growing on me now that I've heard it more, and it fits into the context of the album to have like the catchy sing-along song. But my favorite tracks are Dragon and Converge. Number 8 is Hypnos with Sheol. This is the 6th album by this French band. It's progressive metal. It's got that post-metal influences. Definitely, it's right up my alley. It's really good. If you're a fan of bands like The Ocean, you'll like this. They're signed to the same label as The Ocean. My main critique here is I think they did a bit too much spoken word on this. There's several spoken word passages throughout the album, mostly in French, but I think they do various different languages. The lyrics for the singing and screaming vocals seem to be mostly English. Yeah, I think this is a really good album. And another band that I found this year that I really got into, I went and I explored their whole back catalog, and it's a new favorite for me. Check out the song Sheol Part 2, The Lands of Haze. Number 7 is The World is Quiet Here. And this one's so good, I had to go buy it on vinyl. I should have grabbed my vinyl so I could kind of show it off live. Let me see if I can go grab some of the vinyl and CDs I bought this year real quick. The world is quiet here. I've got this on vinyl. Highly recommend. Oh, and now you're going to hear some fireworks going off in the background because it's Canada Day here. So people are celebrating and they're setting off fireworks in the park, even though they shouldn't. I'm pretty sure it's illegal to do that. So yeah, the world is quiet here. What can I say about this? It's progressive death metal. It's the second album by this American band. Another one that I discovered through the Rhyme Signatures YouTube channel. He has a great channel for discovering new music. I've also found a lot of great music through other channels on YouTube, like Nathan on Shuffle, Notes Reviews. This is the second album by this American band. And I hadn't heard their first album yet at the time of hearing this, but I did go back and check it out. It's also great. If you're a fan of Between the Buried and Me and Others by No One, you'll like this. It features some great guest appearances as well from Keepo Hawk, who toured with Native Construct and who's also featured in one of my songs called Purifery. He does an amazing guest guitar solo on that. Really great guitar player, and he released a great EP this year as well, which if I made a top EPs of the year list, I think Keepo Hawk's his EP would be on that. Max Mowberry is another guest that's featured on this album, and from Others by No One, another really great band. So check this out. Check out the song Aphelion if you want a bit of a preview for this album. Number 6, I've got Obliviscaris, another one that I had to go buy on vinyl. You'll see that I've only bought things that are in my top 7, and I haven't bought them all. I don't want to go bankrupt, but some of these are just so good that you have to buy them. Want to support the artists, and it's just cool to have some vinyl. Obliviscaris, this is their 4th album. They're a very extreme progressive metal band, but they have violins, so that's pretty cool. And they also have beautiful soft sections to break up their heavy blast beat, double kick, growling sections. And this band's just amazing. If you're a fan of an abstract illusion, Persephone, and Will to Run, I think you'll like this. Like I said, they bring the brutality, but they also bring the beauty. All 4 of their albums are masterpieces, so it's hard for me to say where this ranks among them because they're all so close. Even their EPs are pretty great. This is one of those bands that never misses, so I recommend checking out their whole discography if you like this. And I'll be seeing them live later this year. Really looking forward to it. Number 5 is The Ocean and their album Holocene. This is progressive post-metal. It's got some sludge metal influences in there. It's the 10th album by this German band. Another band where everything they put out is great. I don't think this is necessarily their best work, but it continues a streak of greatness that they're on. If you're a fan of Cult of Luna and Hypnos, I think you'll like this. I think this is their second softest album they've ever made. The vast majorities of the vocals on here are clean. The music is slow and peaceful and beautiful and ambient and hypnotic. There's also a handful of moments with harsh vocals where it gets a lot heavier though, so you have to be ready for and okay with that. My favorite track on here is Atlantic. I like the slow burn build up. I like the horns on the track, and then the heavy parts near the end are great too. Second favorite track is Parabiosis. This one I don't yet have a physical copy of, but it is one that I'd love to get, and maybe I should get on that. Here's one that I've got on vinyl as well, Periphery 5, and Gent is not a genre. This is my number 4 album of the year right now. It's their 7th album. They're a progressive metalcore band, or a gent band, even though they don't seem to want gent to be considered a genre. It's more of a sound of the automatopoeia of the low chugging palm muted guitars on like 7-string guitars. They're all syncopated, and they definitely play that style of guitar. And yeah, my first impression on this album was that it's actually my least favorite of their albums, but I really love this band. Like they're one of my favorite bands. And it's still a really good album because everything they put out is great. They do a lot more orchestral, electronic, and jazzy breaks on this album in between the genty metalcore intensity, as well as the odd pop moment. There's great vocals on here, but you do have to be accepting of the emo style vocals and occasional poppy clean vocals, as well as the harsh screams. And Spencer's a very polarizing vocalist, because I feel like a lot of the emo and pop listeners that like that side of his voice don't like the vocals because there's too much screaming, and then a lot of the extreme metal purists don't like the vocals because there's too much emo and poppy stuff. So there's always that. He does both extremes really well. I like both styles of his voice. There's great guitar riffing on this album, great solos, excellent drumming, cool composition. Check out the song Zagreus for a preview. Number 3 is Nospun with their album Opus. This one I don't have on physical copy yet. I don't think they've made a physical copy yet. This is a new band, and they really deserve a lot of love because they made something really amazing here that blew my mind. And I hope they make a physical release of this either on CD or vinyl, because I want to buy it to support them. They're an American band. If you're a fan of Dream Theater, Haken, Devin Townsend, I think you'll like this. This is the best debut I've heard all year so far. I considered even putting it as the number 1 album of the year so far, but there are a couple other albums. Like I feel like this could rise and become my number 1 album of the year, because I want to keep listening to it. This band needs to get some more love. I think when I last checked, they only had 750 monthly listeners on Spotify. Let's get that number up there for these guys. I really hope to see them become a big band. This is just an amazing album. It features a 15-minute epic called Within the Realm of Possibility. That's just great. I recommend checking out that song for a preview of the album. This is one you have to listen to from beginning to end. It's a concept album about a person who sees a bunch of people get murdered or something, and then I'm not really good with like listening to lyrics and analyzing them. I listen more to the music, but I think near the end there's like a twist. I don't want to spoil it all. But yeah, they might have been like seeing the future or something in their dreams and can go warn people before they get murdered or something like that. So kind of a weird story. Hope I got it right. At least that was what I interpreted from what I could hear of the lyrics. But yeah, check this out. Really great progressive metal band. Number 2 is Haken. And this one I got on CD. And I think there's 2 discs. One is the version with lyrics, and then there's the instrumental version as well. And this is their 7th album, Haken Fauna. Great progressive metal album. They're an amazing band from the UK, and I just love Haken. I saw them live with Symphony X in 2022, which was possibly my favorite live concert I saw in 2022. And that's saying a lot because I saw Porcupine Tree, I saw the Mars Volta, Opeth Mastodon, King Gizzard, and the Lizard Wizard. So Haken, Symphony X, they really blew me away. Everything Haken puts out is top notch. And even though this isn't my favorite Haken album, might even be in my bottom 2, even one of the weaker Haken albums is better than what 99% of bands' best albums are. This album still helps cement them as the kings of progressive metal at this point, taking the crowns from bands like Dream Theater, Symphony X, Between the Buried and Me. My favorite track on here is Elephants Never Forget. And my number 1's a bit of a divisive shocker one, and it's one that I got on vinyl as well. Avenged Sevenfold, Life is But a Dream. This is their 8th album, and usually they're more of a traditional, straightforward heavy metal band. Their first 2 albums are metalcore albums. Then they kind of went more traditional, mainstream, a little bit more radio friendly heavy metal, but they've always had a little bit of experimental and progressive nature to them and a bit of genre bending. Like they've always kind of thrown in like a country song and like had really poppy choruses. They've always had like some heavy parts with like breakdowns and the odd scream. So they've always kind of like been all over the place genre wise and not afraid to experiment. But this album really pushed the boundaries for that. Like they've got influences from classical music here, metalcore, industrial pop, electronic, jazz, alternative, and hard rock. Their last album before this, The Stage, was previously their most progressive album yet. But this album makes that album seem safe. And this band, I respect this band a lot because they're constantly reinventing themselves. I like the evolution they've gone through, and I like most of their albums. I didn't really like Hail to the King from 2013, as I feel they kind of stopped experimenting and played it too safe on that album. They sound too similar to bands like Iron Maiden and Metallica. But The Stage really got them back on track. The first single on this album, Life is But a Dream, is called Nobody. It sounds like a continuation of the sound from The Stage. But then the next single they released, We Love You, was this really weird and all over the place song. Now that I've listened to the whole album, I can say it's very strange and interesting. And this album is all over the place. I feel like this album is what Sleep Token wishes they could do. That's another band who released an album this year that kind of does a lot of genre bending, but this is done much better. Yeah, Avenged Sevenfold, they just have this mastery in their composition, the performances, and the production. Some people don't like the production. It's kind of nice to hear like drums that are actually played and sound human, though. It doesn't have the like sound of a lot of modern metal drums where every kick sounds the same and everything like that. Like this actually sounds like real people playing instruments. Even the guitars too, like you can hear things, imperfections, and same thing in the vocals. There are some moments where the vocals are super processed and auto-tune and stuff, but there's also a lot of moments where the vocals are very human and you hear the imperfections in them. My favorite tracks on here are Cosmic, the longest song on the album at just over 7 minutes, and G, which is probably my favorite now, which is a strange, progressive, and jazzy song that's wacky like Frank Zappa and Mr. Bungle, features time signature changes, some female background vocals. And this album is a divisive album. I think a lot of people will think it's amazing and the best album they've ever done, especially people who like progressive and avant-garde and adventurous stuff that takes a lot of risks. But fans of their more kind of straightforward, accessible hard rock stuff are going to find this confusing and weird. But if you like weird stuff like Mr. Bungle, I think you'll like this. If you want bands that bring in a lot of different influences, you'll like this. For example, Beautiful Morning starts off sounding like Them Bones by Alice in Chains, maybe a little bit too much actually. Ordinary, which is probably my least favorite album or least favorite song on the album. I kind of wish it wasn't there. It sounds a lot like Get Lucky by Daft Punk. And Death sounds like a jazzy big band crooner song in the style of Frank Sinatra or something from the 1940s or 50s. The closing track and title track on the album is a solo classical piano piece played by Sinister Gates, which is unexpected but an interesting way to end the album. The lyrics on this album are very philosophical about things like life, death, and AI. But I'll definitely need more listens to digest it all. When I listen, I'm focusing more on the music and the productions and the compositions and the performances, which are all really great. The guitar solos on this album are great as usual, but it's interesting that they are all very different sounding than usual. I like how they're all different from each other in terms of guitar tone, note choices, and playing style, as opposed to their previous albums where the guitar solos all kind of sound similar to each other. They have like shredding and they usually have like guitar harmonies. They really diversified their guitar solo game on this album. Beautiful Morning, like I said, sound too much like Them Bones. Still an awesome song. Easier had the auto-tune vocoder vocal effect on the intro. It was a little bit over the top for me. There are also some guitar parts on that song that sound a bit too much like Red Hot Chili Peppers. So you can definitely like hear the influences that Avenged Sevenfold is pulling from on here, and it's kind of cool. Sometimes maybe it hits a little too close to the influence in terms of how it sounds, but still just a really awesome album. And I think that's all I've got for everyone today. These are my top 25 albums of 2023 so far. Let me know yours down in the comments, or you don't have to do 25. I know not everybody's thought that far ahead. Maybe just give me a top 5, give me a top 10. Let me know what you think of any of the albums on my list, or if you think that there's some that I haven't heard yet that I should check out. Like I said, I've been listening to a lot, but I can't listen to everything. There's just so much great stuff coming out all the time. Hopefully I covered a wide array of albums that you want to listen to or that you have listened to and you enjoyed my analysis. Stay tuned as I post weekly videos on new albums that came out and my first impressions on them. And every month I post my top 10 albums of the month. And I'm doing quarterly videos on an album release radar, which will talk about new albums that are coming out. And maybe I'll even get back to doing some discography rankings, worst to best rankings of bands' discographies. Those are fun to do. I usually like to bring on a guest when I do those and just have some beers and rank an artist discography from worst to best. Hopefully I'll do some of those again in the future. And stay tuned for all that. Hit the subscribe button if that type of content sounds interesting to you. And until next time, peace out.